Hello, welcome to lesson 14.2. Get your title down. Translations and reflections of trigonometric graphs. This slide has a lot of information on it. The only thing I'd like you to write down on this slide is this little box right here. Okay? So you're going to start with writing two general formulas. Y equals A sine B, parentheses, x minus h plus k. I'm going to give you a moment to write that down. And then I'm going to tell you what each letter represents. I should be done in about 10 minutes. This should be a shorter lesson because I think I'm only going to do 3 or 4 graphs. If you have a graphing calculator with you today, feel free to take it out because that'll be your checking device for these problems. Now let me tell you what every letter represents in these formulas. Cosine and sine are the same thing. I'm only going to do cosine and sine today. I'm going to do tangent Monday when we come back. Start with the A, underlining in here. Whether it's cosine or whether it's sine, the A represents the amplitude, how high and how low you go from the middle of the graph. That's not different from yesterday's lesson. The B is the exact same thing as yesterday's lesson. B tells you what? Anyone? Period length. Okay? So for cosine and sine, you take 2 pi divided by b. I'd like you to take note of these formulas, though. They're different than yesterday's formulas because of the parentheses. Okay, yesterday's lesson didn't have parentheses in there because I didn't have a number after the x, minus or plus. I do this time. So I'm going to highlight the changes. One change is this subtract h. Now I'm going to tell you what that number does. Subtracting h is a horizontal, which would be this way. It's a horizontal shift. So your h is a horizontal change or shift. And your k, double underlining it in black here, that's your vertical shift. I'm using the same letters I used all the time in previous lessons, whether it was absolute value graphs, whether it was quadratics, cubics, logarithms. They always used h and k. Nothing changes. K is the vertical shift, or up and down. Okay, so it doesn't make a lot of sense until you start doing some problems. So on this whole slide, there's a lot of information, but that's what I want you to get. And I'm going to make some amplitudes negative today. And that's not going to be a big deal. It's just going to reflect the graphs. You just move them around, and instead of sine going up, sine will go down instead of up. That's for the period length, not for amplitude. Okay, I do want you to get these steps down because doing this, yesterday's lesson was really easy, or it should have been easy. If it wasn't, then we'll just keep explaining it and keep going until we get it. But these are the steps that's going to help you to graph. I would recommend you do these in order. So number 1 is identify sine or cosine. And sine starts in the middle, cosine starts up high. Kind of went through that as an example today. The second thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you draw an axis, which is the middle of the graph. The middle of the graph right now has only been the x-axis. We're going to move it now. I'm going to use a faint dotted line. I can't mark faintly with my marker, but you guys can with your pen or pencil. That'll just be the middle of the graph. The third step is to determine the period, and that's a formula. For cosine and sine, it's 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Tangent we'll do on Monday, and that'll be pi divided by the absolute value of b. Now, I know there's 7 steps, but they don't take long, and after you see a couple of them, you should get it, with the exception of one of them is kind of hard. Exactly, exactly. It's everything that we learned yesterday through that other video with just a few small changes. But these changes make it definitely a lot harder. So step 4, determine the left and right shift endpoints. Determine the shift, so the left and right endpoints. Just like I did yesterday with, it ended up to be 4 pi is the total period sometimes. And we're going to need to find those endpoints for in step 4. 5 is determine the amplitude. That's just a number in front. That's one of the easiest things you could do. And then find the middle of the period and then quarters, kind of like what I did in the homework problems I went over. And then you just connect all the dots. Okay, I know it's 7 steps, but they go kind of fast. It just takes a little practice. You're going to get this 2 years in a row. You're going to get this in pre-calc again. You can use your calculator a lot of times, but sometimes you can't. If you end up getting to AP Calc, half the test is no calculator, so you have to really kind of understand these graphs and how they work. Okay, I hope that was enough time to get them all down. If not, I can come back later at the end of the hour. Here's the first one I'm going to do. Graph y equals 3 plus half cosine pi x. So I'll let you write that problem down while I attempt to draw a sketch of this graph. I'm going to keep referring to the last slide for the steps so you know what each step means. I'm coming back to this in a second if you didn't get a chance to write it down, but here we go. Look to see if it's sine or cosine. Step 1. This one is cosine. I know I start up high. That's a mental thing I do. I don't have to write anything on the graph. Step 2. Draw the middle. When I say axis here, that means middle of the graph, and we're going to just do it with a little faint line. So I'm going to go back one more time. So a vertical shift. The vertical shift, one more slide back, was the K. This number way out back. So looking at this one, do I have a number way out back? No. Be careful though. I don't have a 1, because then it would be changed. Brianna?
Isn't it 3?
Yeah, you know, this one is kind of tricky, because they actually put the vertical shift in front, and that's not a difficult thing to do, but this equation could have been written like this. 1/2, the A is what's times cosine or sine. And then I could have done this, plus 3 way out back, but they just chose to put it in the front just for a little twist, which is perfectly acceptable for them to do. So normally my axis is the x-axis right here, but now I'm going to shift it up 3. So 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to draw a real faint dotted line here. This is the middle of the graph. Cosine will be above it and below it, just like sine goes above and below the middle. Let's go back a step. Determine the period or the endpoint. That's where you do 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. What is b in this case? B is not this guy, that's a. B is this. Let me write my function down here so you can reference it. Y equals a sine b parentheses x minus h plus k. In this case, the b is what's in front of that x. There are no parentheses, so there's no h here. So this right there is my b. So my period is going to be 2 pi divided by pi. I don't really need the absolute value because these are often not negative, but if they are, I'd flip it. 2. So it's 2. So now I'm gonna mark my ends. So here's my end. I start here at the beginning, and I end somewhere. I don't know where, it really makes no difference, but I know that my ending is 2. That is going to be 1 cycle or 1 period. So let's go back. Determine the period, check. Determine left and right shift endpoints, check. Determine amplitude. This is kind of something I do in my mental head. So what's the amplitude? Mike?
1/2.
1/2. So that's this number right there. So instead of going up a full unit, I'm going up half a unit. Okay? So here's the middle. Now let me change back to black here. Here is 4. I'm only going up to right there, which is 3.5, and I'm only going below to like 2.5. Between these little arrows here, this distance, that's going to be 1 because I'm going half up and half down from the middle axis. So I got that down, determine amplitude, find middle of period, then quarters. So now I'll go back to red here, and the halfway point is there, half of that, half of that. This puts it into the 4 turns of a circle, because you have 4 little quarters of a circle. I could put a scale on here if I wanted to. Half of 2 is 1. So this guy right here would be half. This guy would be 1.5 or 3 halves. There are no pi here because the b is a pi and it got rid of the pi. And now I just start drawing. So here I go. Cosine starts in the middle or up high? Up high. But notice how I'm just going halfway up. Now I need to end there. So I go all the way over to 2 and I end halfway up. Then I go to the middle, which is 1, which is 1 below. And here is where I hit the axes. Look at this guy. It's a really thin cosine graph. Really squished. I'd probably have enlarged this by making this scale bigger, but that's okay. Now, when you do your homework, you're going to have like 8 of these. It's not going to be many tonight. What I'd like you to do is check your work on your calculator. So when I go to my calculator, I've already typed these in, and you can verify them also. This isn't it, but I've got one right here. I put all 4 problems I'm doing today already in here to save me some writing time. The first one is the one we did. Highlight the equal sign. Zoom 7 for trig. This looks similar. It is a little different though, because remember the ending of my zoom trig is 2 pi. Where is the ending here? It's 2. I wonder if 2 is the top of a peak, like I have. Let me check. Trace, 2, enter. Notice how it's the top of one of those cycles. So that would be, like that spot right there. Okay? I wonder if this middle, which I have as 1, is the low point. You could check this by doing this. Trace 1, enter. Hey, look at that. That's the low point. I get it. Okay? And that's how you verify. Questions? All right, moving on. Now that I did that one kind of slowly, I'll do the next one a little faster. This one has that parenthesis, so the little shifting is going to make this a little odder. More odd. Draw your little graph. And away we go. Today, for the sake of just teaching, I'm going to teach these all instead of giving work time, like I normally do, to practice them. So here we go. Step 1, determine if it's sine or cosine. Sine starts in the middle. Step 2, draw the axes in. So figure out how much up and down it is. What's my k? There isn't one. There's no plus or minus number here, nor a trick like the last one in front. So there is no up and down shift. So normally my little axis is the x-axis. It's still the x-axis. That's the middle of my graph. Okay, I'm going to go back a couple slides because I forgot my steps until I get the hang of this. Step 3, determine the period. 2 pi divided by b. What's b in this problem? 3. It's the number in front of the x. It should be pulled out in parentheses. Okay? My formula is y equals a sine of b parentheses x minus h plus k. So my b is right there. That's how I figure out my period. It's 2 pi divided by the absolute value of 3, which is 2/3 pi. Mike?
Wouldn't be x plus h?
In this case, I'll do that in a second. Yeah, it is kind of, but it's a little different on this one because the formula is always minus. So I'll explain that in a second. So now my ending is 2 pi over 3. This is going to be weird. Right here is 2 pi over 3. That's my ending because that's 1 period length. However, this is where it gets tough. This is the hardest part of these graphs. It's called a phase shift or a movement. They use the word phase shift because Sine waves and waves are a lot of times in either like electricity, electronics, or sound, and that's out of phase, if you've ever heard that saying. You're going to determine the left and right endpoints. I kind of did, but I got to determine that shift left or right. So now the shift is going to be pi over 3, but it's plus. So normally it's shift to the right, but remember how these are always backwards the way you think? So it's shifting to the left. So now I normally start right here. But I don't start right there. I got to move this guy over how many units? Pi over 3. So this is actually like negative pi over 3 now because I'm to the left. And I know it's kind of tricky, but that's why we're going to spend 2 to 3 days practicing this lesson. I've only got like 3 lessons left, but they're going to take multiple days. Brianne.
Suppose x minus pi over 3, you move it to the
Go to the right, yep. Minus means the right because the formula is minus. And this would be like minusing a negative pi over 3, which is positive. Okay, kind of like how we've done all the other graphs. All right, so now if I shifted this endpoint, which I'm going to put with a highlight, boop, I have to shift the other endpoint. How far? Pi over 3. Where do I go then? What is that unit? Pi over 3. Because this is 2/3. And moving it over 1/3 changes it to 1/3 pi. So these blue highlights are the keys. You just move both ends, the right end and the left end. And now I'm almost ready. Almost ready to graph. And I know this seems weird because this is probably one of the hardest ones I'm doing. So let's go back. Determine left or right shift and endpoints. Determine amplitude, find the middle, the quarters, and graph. Okay, so amplitude is 4. So I'm not going to go up to 1 like I normally do. I'm going to go up to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm a 4. That's how high I go. I go down 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how low I go. Now I determine the middles and the halves. I'm going to do this in kind of green so you can illustrate it. Here are my ends. Halfway is right there. Half of this and half of this. That's splitting it into 4 quarters of the circle. Now drawing this in blue, I think, is the best way to go. Sine starts in the middle, middle. It ends in the middle, middle. Halfway, it kind of comes back down, and it goes up and down and up. That's 1 period. And of course I could continue this forever, but I just need that 1 period to get it. First time you've seen this, it'll be challenging. Just keep going through it. Okay? 2 down, 2 to go. Keep moving. Here we go. Negative cosine of 4x. Kind of a simpler one. Except for the negative, they're adding 1 more piece of difficulty. Draw my graph. Ready to go. Just for fun, y equals a cosine of b parentheses x minus h plus k. So let's start with it. Let's start with cosine or sine. Cosine starts up high. In this case, it's negative. Be careful. That'll come into play later. Second thing, let's determine the middle, the axes. The middle is always right here. Change that to red. It's always right here, except when I have a plus k. There ain't no plus k. No adding or subtracting this at all. So I stay in the middle, which is the x-axis. Okay, determine my endpoints, or my period. My period is always 2 pi divided by b. b in this case is 4. It's multiplied by the x. So I go like this. I simplify. 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So my end of cosine is going to be right here, which is pi over 2, if there is no h, because h moves them. Here are my endpoints, here and here, kinda. It's cosines, it'll be up high. However, is there an h to move them? No adds or subtracts, so no moving. That's the nice part, because the h is the hardest thing to do on these. So then I just got to kind of, let's draw my quarters and my halves. Halfway, halfway here, halfway here. What are these? This is half of a pi, so this would be pi over 4. These are really weird. You can label them or you can't label them. Anybody know what half of a fourth is? 1/8. If you want to label that as 1/8 and 3/8, you can. I'm not going to require you to do that, although I may ask some questions later about where its highest point is. But that's for later. Let's just get this down now. Cosine normally starts up high. Is there an amplitude change here? It's -1 instead of +1. So normally cosine starts at 1, so if it's -1, what do you think? Starts at -1. So it's just a reflection or a flip. So instead of my regular cosine going like this, it's now going to start low and go like this. Not a big deal. So now let me change this to black and finish out my drawing. Starting down low, ending down low. The halfway point for that is on the opposite end of the amplitude, and then the middles are the crossing of the axis. And connect the dots. And of course it keeps going if I need to. And if this was your homework tonight, I might do a little verification check. I didn't on the last one, but I will on this one, just to check things out.
Make sure you're staying on.
Yeah. Okay, let's go here, zoom 7. I normally do zoom 7, you don't have to. And I'll check 2 points. I'll check this guy and this guy just to make sure I did okay. So trace. This was at 0. I wonder if I'm at -1. 0, enter. Yes. This one I know the halfway point is at pi/4. I wonder if I'm at 1. Second pi divided by 4, enter. I'm at 1. Why does it change it to 0.785? Because that's 3.14 divided by 4. No big deal. This will take some practice. Last one. Ready? Here we go. This is clearly the hardest one.
Why did you say the hardest for last?
I always do. Oh, not always. Almost always. What is the difference between the general form? I put a 3 there. That should be a B. What am I thinking? What is the difference between the general form and the form I have here?
We'll make that an A.
Yeah, thank you. What's the difference between this guy and this guy? David.
It's -1 cent.
Yes, that's one difference. It's not the one I'm looking for, but that is one. Mike.
The B is inside the parentheses.
That's it. That's what makes this problem hard. The B is normally factored out. So if it's not factored out, guess what? I need to factor it. Oh my God, factoring from back then? Yes, that's why trig is hard. Y equals -3 sine. I will always have a 1 in front of the B. How do I get a 1? I pull out the 4, because that'll make it a 1. Pull out the 4. X minus something. I'll do that in a second. Anybody know what goes in there? What is it? 1/4 pi. 1 or pi/4. I wonder how we got that. If you distribute this back in, what's 4 times pi/4? Pi, which is what you wanted. That's the tricky part. So if you pull out a 4, you need to divide by a 4, because pulling out of a parenthesis is opposite of multiplication, which is division. Tricky, but I have faith in you, you can do it. Graph, ready to go. Now it's in my standard form. All right, what do I do now? I start by saying sine or cosine? Sine. Starts in the middle, goes up and down, etc., etc., etc. Next thing I do is find that middle. What's the middle here?
Isn't it 1?
1, up or down?
-1, down.
-1 is down. This is exactly the way you think it would be. This is the opposite way you think it would be, just like all those other ones have been, H's and K's. So my axis is going to be right there, -1. Just a faint dotted line so I know the middle. Okay, so I know my sine wave will curl around this baby. Next thing I do, endpoints, or period. period equals 2 pi divided by b. B is 4. 2/4 is 1/2, so it's pi over 2. My end point, I believe, is pi over 2. However, there's a shift.
Please excuse the interruption.
Pi
All the
Left
wrestlers
or right?
going on the St. Matthias field trip
Right.
should
Right.
report to the weight room right now. Thank you.
Here is 1/4 because that's 1/2. So I'm thinking, okay, shift that guy over. That's a starting point. If I shift that guy over, I shift this guy over. Okay? So where is this end? 1. I move it over a 1/4, and this is a 1/2. What's a 1/4 more than a 1/2? 3/4. You got to be careful with that. If you're not sure, 1/4 added to my normal end, which is 1/2. You can use a calculator to do that. 1/4 plus 1/2. You should know that it's 1/4 plus common denominator is 2/4. 1/4 plus 2/4 is 3/4. That's my ends. I'm going to actually use a little highlighter here to show you end, beginning. My wave has to fit between those. Whoa, let's go. So now I just kind of draw my halfway point. Ooh, I already got it. And then my quarter points, okay, those are there. What are those? Don't really worry about it. It's actually 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. Not really concerned with that. But that would be my quarter turns of the circle. And now I start graphing. Okay, little issue here. Sine starts in the middle. So don't forget, it's the middle of your axis, which you flip with the dotted line. Brianna.
Did you forget to mark the amplitude?
Yeah, you did.
I'm doing that about right now. Okay, so yeah, I didn't forget, I just waited. So now, I kind of look at my amplitude last. It's 3, so I'm going to go up 3, right?
No, it's negative.
But it's -3. So sine starts in the middle, so I start traveling down 3. This is -1 because of that guy. Whoa, so now I need to go 3 more down. -4. -1, -2, -3, -4. That's 3-unit difference, 3 unit for my amplitude. So I start to go down to here. And then I need to go up 3 from the middle. So hit the middle, then the 3/4 point is here, and I need to go up 3. If I'm at -1, this is up 1, this is up 2, this is up 3. So I'm really at 2. And come back down. Nope. Come back down to the axes. This green highlight is my actual graph. I realize this is tough, but I will spend 3 days on it next week. My only objective next week is to get your projects done and to do 3 days worth of this. Let me give you your homework. Here's your homework. 14-2, page 844. 26 to 31 all, that's matching. That should be very easy, A, B, C, D, just like you did before. 34 to 42, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42. It's 5 of them, 5 graphs. And then one little tricky one, but it's not that bad. 50 is pretty easy, it just asks you, it's got some words in it. That's all it is. Okay? In total, this assignment should take you probably 15 to 20 minutes total.